Welcome to Hard Facts with Greg McKettrick. Men's Health Unfiltered, the podcast for pharmacists by pharmacists. Starting now.
Hey guys, this is Greg McKettrick with RX Connection, and I'm here today to talk to you about a new podcast that we have rolling out, and it's called Hard Facts with Greg McKettrick, this guy. This is all about men's health. It's about men's health, sexual function, about intimacy, and about overall health, longevity, hormone optimization. So we're going to get into a lot of details. You've probably seen me on some of the other RX Connection broadcasts talking about either men's health or some of the programs that we are now making available through RX Connection and Expedicare for the pharmacies. In a nutshell, we're really opening up the whole avenue of compounding and accessibility to compounded prescriptions to community pharmacies to help build your cash flow, your business, and really extend your reach into your community. So in doing that, we're going to introduce a lot of new compounds for you. And obviously, my forte is men's health. So everything from hormone optimization to longevity to ED. And we're going to learn over the course of the following podcast how to incorporate these things into your practice. So a little bit about myself. I guess it's safe to say that, nobody goes through pharmacy school and works for 35 years and all of a sudden decides, oh, I'm going to be a men's health specialist. Things happen for reasons, and they happen because, through experience and through our interactions with patients and with others, we learn really what our niche might be. So in full disclosure, I'll just tell you the reason that I think I have so much of a empathetic response with the guys in particular is that obviously I just relate. I was told back 15 years ago when I was a lot younger, I was in my 40s at that time. The counselor told me that, I'm a typical man, and that means that I'm egocentric. I have self-esteem that's based on a lot of physicality, on my maleness, and that, when my strength starts to go away, if I become weaker as I'm aging, it would have a significant impact on my self-perception because, my little child who's inside, who's afraid that people are going to see that I'm not very strong and robust and I'm a little bit weak, that's not going to bear well. Well, this really came into play with me, and I was able to kind of look at it and say, well, I understand that concept. However, I don't agree. I don't think that we have to grow old. I think obviously we all age. There's no stopping that. You can't freeze the clock or flip the sand dial, but it's how you go about that. And this is where I think there's a significant opportunity working with our patients, because for a lot of them, they have been told this is just an aging process. This is how things are going to be for you. And I don't agree with that. I don't think that's necessarily the case, because we have so many options, so many different ways of approaching this and really resolving these problems for these guys. Now, just to show you a little bit of information about myself, this is just a little presentation that I have done, and it kind of goes into a little detail in terms of what I see and how I envision the patients and how we can work with them. So what is the biggest part of this? Well, it's understanding men and why these issues impact us so much. In my presentations, I'll go through and I'll talk about just what are the definitions. What does this mean? What is erectile dysfunction? What is sexual dysfunction? And I don't think there's any better way to find a definition than go to the dictionary, right? So here is good old Merriam-Webster, and this is what our guys face, and this is what they are told. ED, it's equivalent to impotence, so inability to achieve or maintain erection. Understand it. Impotence. Let's look up impotence. Impotence. Weakness, lack of strength, lack of power, lack of vigor, an abnormal physical or psychological state. This is what the definitions are. This is what guys think when these things hit them, and it is very impactful. They see this and they feel this to their core. So I kind of turn this stuff around. I don't use those definitions. And what do I say? Well, what's ED? It means things ain't going the way I want them to. I'm not able to do what I want when I want. I'm not able to maintain function satisfactory for myself, for my partner. And again, I see these as being potential negatives in terms of my relationships. So we need to be able to work through those and get past that process. So let's talk about when these patients present and, what happens when they're coming in talking about these issues. Way too often I hear guys talk about they've lost their interest in sex. Well, first off, I try to speak very plainly, and you know what? I just call bullshit, because the reason you lose interest is because your capacity has been diminished. You don't have the ability to perform the way you'd like to. And that is what is influencing your interest, your libido, your drive. Men, when they can't perform sexually, withdraw completely. So that means withdrawing and withholding all intimacy. So forget about the act of intercourse and having sex. I'm talking about holding hands, kissing, touching, cuddling on the couch, even talking intimately goes away. And the main reason is that, when you take the physical away from a man, all too often they completely close up. So they shut off intimacy altogether. I can't perform, so I'm not going to start the game. That's the basic premise. And, what I see with this is really, obviously, it's a relationship kryptonite. And why do I say that? Well, I say it because over a decade of dealing with prostate cancer patients, when they come in and literally they have had their sexual function taken away from them. A lot of them have dealt with incontinence and ED and low self-esteem and relationship issues stemming from this disease. And they are left struggling, trying to figure out what to do. And it has a terrible impact on their relationships, because whether or not it is a two-way street and the partner is really dissatisfied, it's more that the patient, that these guys are so dissatisfied and they're so despondent that they just shut it off altogether. We really need to focus on what's important to men and how we can get them better. So, what do we want to talk about as far as the erectile dysfunction and how we work with this? Well, number one thing, it's a very common problem for guys. Used to be, we didn't talk about this at all. And I think that there's really been a tremendous surge in terms of awareness. Again, I predate things like Viagra. I was working as a pharmacist when, we were prescribing yohimbine for patients, because that was really about the best alternative we had. Well, lo and behold, Viagra hits the market. And, you would have thought that nobody ever had ED before Viagra, because people didn't come up and ask questions about it. You didn't have people that were, looking to see what the potential cure was for their problem, because there really wasn't anything out there that was greatly functional. But that really changed things when we started seeing the PDE5s emerge. That allowed us to see where, there was a positive outlook. And I kind of laugh here. This bottom line, the prevalence of erectile dysfunction increased 111% from 1995 to 2025. Now, there's a number of reasons for this, and some of them are basically, just like what I said. We didn't have medication to diagnose it, so cases were left undiagnosed, or at least not mentioned, not spoken. In addition to that, though, we've also seen a tremendous change in terms of lifestyle and lifestyle diseases. So where we used to see men in their mid to late 40s, 50s, and above starting to show issues with sexual dysfunction and cardiac function and you know, vaso-occlusive disease and cholesterol, all the rest of this. We're starting to see it much younger. So it is not uncommon these days to see uh, men in their 20s coming in and they have low testosterone. They're very overweight. They have diabetes. They're starting to have issues with hypertension. They have a very, very, call it a low energy lifestyle. Though we're not active, we're seeing more issues due to, again, diseases like diabetes, obesity that are influencing sexual function. So, these are things that do push that dial and they show why we're seeing more cases. But I really think it's more about awareness, um, because not only do we now have medications, but now we also have all of these online companies that are out there, these telehealth companies that are providing these medications for patients. And, we think about this in terms of just the level of awareness when it's in your face 24/7 almost. And you have Hims and Roman, Rougiette, lemonade, and on and on and on. Guys are seeing this. And I think that's on one side, it's increasing awareness and it's encouraging the conversation. On the other hand, it is allowing for this almost anonymous prescribing where patients really are not being brought in and gone through a full intake survey where you go through their whole history, what comorbidities there are, what else is happening as far as their function. Now, this isn't about, you know, do you take nitroglycerin product? Yes. Okay. Well, you can't have it. No. Okay. You can have it. And that's almost the extent of the intake survey for a lot of these online companies. We want to get better than that. So, we want to make sure that we are working with these patients to find out what's going to be their best cure, what's going to be the best options for them. So again, this is the premise on what I do and why. Now, there's a lot that goes into ED in general, and there's a lot of different functions as far as, what's the causation. So most ED has a vascular component, meaning blood flow. And we know that by the age of 40, natural nitric oxide production has been reduced to about 50%. And nitric oxide is kind of our natural vasodilator. So as nitric oxide production is dropping, you're seeing buildup of plaque, narrowing of arterial walls, or thickening of arterial walls and narrowing of blood vessels. And all of these secondary lifestyle conditions that go along with that: blood pressure, cardiac function, sexual function. So as we go through this process, big part is going to be restoring good, healthy blood flow. Then you have all of the components that kind of fall underneath that and feed into it because, once the problem arises, I hate to say it, but, once the suggestion of poor sexual function gets between the ears, man, it really affects what's between the legs. So psychogenic ED or performance anxiety, as soon as you doubt your ability, then you start to have more and more issues. Medication-induced ED or medical condition, again, so diabetes, blood pressure, you think about these medications and how they affect sexual function. And then you have the others. Premature ejaculation can be a big component, but it can also be based in a psychological as well as physiological component. Same with delayed ejaculation or anorgasmia. So again, a lot of these different things are tied together. They fall under the same umbrella. And, it all has to be understood so that we can properly treat it. So like we mentioned a little bit before, the lifestyles, modification, changing this, we're going to get into all of these when we're working with patients. This is going to be part of our basic consultation. We're going to talk to them about supplements. We're going to talk to them about medications. We're going to talk to them about, changing their lifestyles even. So, we want to be able to talk with them in ways that are going to really impact them and invite them to really open up and give us more information. This is critical. So when we're dealing with this, keep in mind that this isn't a comfortable conversation. Okay? Back, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, there was a term that was coined. It was called the door handle conversation. And this was basically a way to uh, depict the typical interaction between the patient and their physician. They go in to have their blood checked or cholesterol checked, or they got a mole, and doctor comes in, does all their ruminations, goes through, makes the notations in the chart, and as the doctor's leaving, they literally have the hand on the door handle, hence door handle conversation. Like, is there anything else that we can do for you? And that's the moment when guys are like, by the way, yeah, I need to talk to you. Things aren't working quite so well. So again, this is not something that guys jump into. If you're on the golf course and you've got high cholesterol or blood pressure or arthritis, man, that's easy. You can talk to your buddies about that all day long. Nobody wants to talk about ED because again, this is something that really hits at our core. So being able to have these conversations in ways that will invite that intimacy in terms of that consult so that you can get the information you need to best help them is extremely important. That allows you then to talk to them about lifestyle modifications, about weight loss, about exercise, about avoiding the satiety. Just don't be a couch potato. And then let's talk about what we can do to improve function. So, hey, great supplements, whether that be to boost metabolic function or like the nitric oxide, as I mentioned, which is a key component in ED and sexual function for men. Um, I'm sure you're all aware, you're a pharmacist, so you know the relationship between nitric oxide, cyclic GMP, and the PDE5 inhibitors. They all have to be there. That nitric oxide, that's the activating molecule for the cyclic GMP. So if it's not there, you can throw all kinds of PDE5 in that bucket and you're not necessarily going to get much. In fact, that's why most guys, they'll be put on Viagra and 5 years later, it stops working. So again, really get intimate with these details so that we can help guys. We want to optimize total function. So when you're looking at any individual patient, we want to know, what's their comorbidities, what are the medications, what other medical conditions are they dealing with? Hey, have we looked at their hormone levels so we can address part of that is psychological because there's a whole brain fog that goes with low T, the energy, libido, and again, stimulation and the facilitating of good sexual function due to healthy testosterone. It's not going to, testosterone doesn't make or break sexual function, but boy, it's important. It really does help. And then, like I said, the blood flow. So nitric oxide, huge, huge, huge. And being able to understand, what's best for each guy. We're going to talk through this process about supplements, what are appropriate for particular age groups and what are not. And then how do you implement function? How do you start these processes in terms of therapy? Do you go with a bazooka right off the bat? And regardless of what other situations are going on, you're gonna blast it and you're gonna find a really quick remedy. Well, yeah, you can, but in reality, what we want to do is work our way up. We want to reestablish function, we want to reestablish healthy blood flow. We want to get spontaneous function as much as possible for these patients in the least intrusive method, but we have a lot of tools. So keep in mind supplements, the PDE5s, different dosage forms of PDE5s and different combinations, hormone support, medical devices like vacuum pumps and auto injectors, penile injections for the guys that really need this. So over the course of this process, you will become intimately familiar with these different therapies. We will coach you up on how to approach patients. How do you deal with the patients when they're coming in and asking questions? And the flip side of that, how do you actually establish the relationship with prescribers so that when you do get that patient and you want to be the advocate for the patient and go in and make the requests, you are going to be well received. So we need to build this platform It's based off of understanding, it's based off of empathy, and then it's based on the tools that we're going to provide for you so that you are going to be better able to address not only the patients, but also those prescribers and really establish this in your practice. Um, this will tie in again, like I said, if you are taking advantage of the Expedicare and the central fill process, you are going to have availability for all of these different compounds that we work with, because again, a lot of times we're a little bit limited with commercial products being able to really deliver the best outcomes for patients and find solutions that are workable for them. So, keep all of this in mind. If you haven't looked at the RX Connection Expedicare and getting yourself signed up where you will have the ability to really take advantage of the central fill process, have a compounding pharmacy provide those for your practice. So again, you can be full service in not just this, but in a number of different therapeutic categories. Really consider it. Boy, I strongly encourage it, because again, keep in mind, you're going to expand your business platform. These are cash-based prescriptions in general, because insurances, they don't really cover the compounds. So this is really a great ROI if you dive into this. And like I said, we're going to be there to help you. I am going to be here as your coach, as kind of an instructor through this process. These podcasts will go through really how I approach patients. We'll have case studies involved in this, as well as kind of the basics in terms of how to incorporate these. So I really look forward to working with you more in the future. Again, if I can encourage anything, jump on board the RX Connection platform and take full advantage of all the resources. And again, until next time, live harder. These are the hard facts with Greg McKettrick. And thank you so much for paying a little bit of attention to me.
If you like our podcast, please follow us on your favorite streaming platform.